Hello everyone, this is Amit Goswami, quantum physicist, consciousness researcher, and quantum activist.
Hi, this is Bill Knauer for Author Magazine, and today I'm here with Amit Goswami, author of the Everything Answer Book, How Quantum Science Explains Love, Death, and the Meaning of Life. Amit, welcome to Author.
Thank you very much, and I am really looking forward to this interview.
So, Amit, let's start with you. You describe yourself as a quantum activist.
Yes.
What is the difference between a quantum activist and what we might think of as a traditional scientist?
Well, a traditional scientist more or less is taught to be objective, and therefore the traditional scientist is very careful about not being affected by the stuff that he or she studies.
Personally affected.
Personally affected.
Right.
But that goes both ways. I mean, personally affected, of course, can produce prejudice. And of course, we know very well, scientists develop prejudices, very much so.
Right.
So that's not excluded anyway by so-called objectivity. But the other thing that it does is that it precludes certain things from scientific studies, explorations. Consciousness is one of those things.
Yeah.
If you want to do consciousness research, then it's ridiculous that your findings, you cannot test the one laboratory subject, laboratory object that you know the most intimately, and you can test on yourself.
Right.
So just as doctors, any good medical researchers always involve themselves in the medical research because he or she is the best judge, of course. Similarly, science of consciousness is same thing. It's about our health of the consciousness itself, not only just mental and physical.
You know, so consciousness, so as someone who's been creative or trying to be deliberately creative for since I was a wee kid, the idea of consciousness has never been a problem to me. It always made sense experientially. But I was reading some article in the New York Times where some science writer brought up the term consciousness and was quite dismissive of it. Where is it? What is it? Prove it, and so on. When you say consciousness, what do you mean?
Well,
how do you define that?
What I mean is the self-evident subject-object split that we observe ourselves having. The world, according to the materialist, is made up elementary particles of matter.
Right.
So everything is material.
Stuff.
Object.
You can touch
stuff.
it. Right.
Object.
Yeah.
Object stuff. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves looking at the objects.
Right.
And not only that, we have an experience of the I, which is actually reverberating in the word I that we constantly use. Of course, scientists today tells us not to use I so much as me, they objectify.
Right.
So, of course, we have a tendency to objectify ourselves anyway. And this additional prodding from the scientists have made us into a very selfish, me-oriented, narcissistic generation, of which, of course, our new elected president is a perfect example.
And also, consciousness but sort of demands a connectivity between, so you're here, and you're there, and I'm here, but from a quantum perspective, that division is perceptive only, essentially?
Well, this requires a little bit of subtlety.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because you and I are separate, it's obvious.
Right.
But you and I are one is not so obvious. That's a claim by mystics.
Right.
And then we find that, yes, we can be more one if we cultivate a relationship with each other. And it turns out that human beings do have the tendency of such relationships, not just because we seek sex with the opposite sex usually, not just because of that, but we also have social relationships with others that we call loving relationships. So this aspect of our tendencies is confusing. Why is that? And that is reflective of the fact that we are also one underneath. So we can do it both ways. We can go to ourselves and seek subtler and subtle level of consciousness within us, which will reflect the oneness, or we can get the oneness impulse satisfied through social relationships with others. And generally speaking, we do the latter, and especially under the aegis of scientific materialism, matter is everything, object is everything. We try to pay more attention to other objects, including other human beings, whom we consider as objects because we think ourselves of as objects. Obviously, the other is also object.
That's interesting. You know, it's my own writing. So writing has been the experience that I've learned the most about myself and life and other people through this experience of sitting alone and writing about my own life. And writing got infinitely easier when I began to see myself as just asking questions and then perceiving the answer coming from something that was available to everybody. It was the only practical way of explaining what I was experiencing. And once I allowed my ego to sit down and have that experience, it got way easier and answers came way faster.
Yes.
And as soon as I tried to take credit for everything, everything slowed down. And when I hear you describe the quantum field, that feels very much like what I am hoping to communicate with as I write.
That's it. You described it very well too. Initially, we are very attached to the me.
Yeah, it's mine. I did this.
Right. And as we get beyond that attachment into the I, the experiencer, the experiencer is a true reflection of the oneness of consciousness.
Right.
So the closer we go to the I, and then we have this creative experiences of flow, the I and the me interacts, and that feels wonderful. And we really see that me, when it complements the I, then it's maximally happy. Other times, okay, pleasure, but it's
not the same.
Does not compare with flow.
No, no. And you know what's interesting? I talk to a lot of writers, and a lot of them don't like to see themselves as mystic at all. They're very bread and butter, but they can't stop themselves from describing it the same way, which is when they really get into that flow, they lose track of themselves. There isn't that same awareness of self that they have going about the world, wondering about how they look, and it seems to disappear as something else takes over.
Exactly.
And it feels great.
Exactly.
It feels as good as it can.
Flow is our greatest happiness short of enlightenment.
So I have one more question for you. You are a scientist, you're an activist, but you're also a writer. You've written many books.
Yes.
And so I like to ask all my authors this question. Finish this sentence. If writing has taught you anything, it's taught you what?
Writing has brought me two things, not one. One is discipline. Certainly, writing is something that I find is really very good for the undisciplined mind. Even thinking about writing, which I do a lot, making notes, that's a discipline thing. And also it gives me that flow experience other than teaching and rarely in real spiritual settings like a spiritual work or meditation. Those experiences of oneness are rather rare for me, especially now that I'm older, because I cannot do very hard practice anymore that I could do when I was younger. I mean, it's unthinkable for me what I used to do, like 7 days of continuous meditation.
Wow.
I cannot do that now. Or 2 weeks of all by myself, no connection with the world. I cannot do that anymore. So those experiences have become relatively rare, but this creative flow that takes place between me and my audience, and creative flow that takes place between me and what I'm writing, those fill up my life with great amount of joy.